Wesley Kane cursed under his breath as the town car screeched to the curb outside JFK's private terminal, his Rolex flashing 11:57 a.m. 3 minutes before the gate would close. His flight to Zurich, the one he absolutely could not miss, was already boarding, and the last thing he needed was another delay. Not after the morning he'd had. Wesley grabbed his carry-on and bolted through the sliding glass doors, ignoring the stairs as he rushed past the polished marble floors, his Italian leather shoes echoing against the walls. Security barely gave him a second glance. He owned half the airport's private terminal through one of his holding companies. But it was the woman at the boarding gate who made him stop in his tracks. Not because she blocked his path, though she did, one hand calmly raised, but because she was stunning. "Sir," she said firmly, eyes narrowing as she looked at his crumpled ticket. "You're late." "I'm 3 minutes early," he argued, breathless, straightening his black suit jacket. "You're 3 minutes before gate closes, not before boarding. Big difference." Wesley blinked. No one spoke to him like that. Not in years. She glanced at his name on the ticket. "Mr. Kane. Flying first class to Zurich." "Yes." "Then you should have arrived first class early," she said, then paused. "But lucky for you, I'm in a good mood." She scanned his ticket and stepped aside. "Run." Wesley hesitated just a second longer than he should have. Just long enough to take her in her cherry red lipstick, the dark waves of her hair twisted into a low bun, the curve of her lips that looked like they fought a smile even while she was clearly trying to be professional. "What's your name?" he asked, even as the gate behind her beeped open. She raised a brow. "Plane's leaving, Mr. Kane." "I'll get another one," he replied smoothly. She stared at him like he was crazy. "You'll miss your flight." "For my name." "I'm a billionaire," he said without flinching. "I can buy a jet." "I can't buy your name." She blinked once, then bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. "Piper Jennings." Wesley grinned, stepping backward onto the jet bridge. "Thank you, Piper Jennings, for letting me run." She chuckled and shook her head. "You haven't run yet." He turned and jogged away, but not before glancing over his shoulder to catch one last glimpse of her. The flight passed in a haze of business emails and espresso, but Wesley's thoughts kept drifting back to her. Piper. He didn't even know why. She was just a gate agent. She probably forgot about him the second he stepped on that plane. But that smile, that voice, the way she didn't care who he was, stuck with him. When he landed in Zurich 12 hours later, he attended the investors' gala, sealed a deal worth $70 million, and still found himself distracted by a woman who checked his boarding pass. 2 days later, he was back in New York. He hadn't planned to be. His schedule was packed, but he canceled meetings. He rearranged his calendar. He made sure he flew back on the same airline through the same terminal. And he waited. 3 hours passed before he saw her again. She was at the same gate, typing something on her monitor, her brow furrowed in focus. He walked up slowly, not sure what he was doing. It wasn't like him. He didn't chase. He didn't linger. But he couldn't shake her. She looked up and froze. "You again?" she said, blinking. "Me again. You missed your flight?" "No. I booked one I didn't need." She stared at him. "Excuse me. I booked a round-trip ticket to Zurich just to see if you worked here again." Piper slowly stood from her stool. "You booked an international flight just to talk to me. I wanted to know if you'd get coffee with me." She blinked. "Is this some kind of prank?" "No," he said, serious now. "I haven't stopped thinking about you since I got on that plane. And I don't do this. I don't chase." For a moment, she said nothing. "Then you don't even know me. Let me fix that." She hesitated. "You're serious?" "Deadly." She glanced at the clock. "I'm off in 21 minutes. I'll wait." They ended up at a tiny coffee shop 2 blocks from the terminal. Piper ordered a dirty chai. Wesley got black coffee. He paid before she could even reach for her wallet. "I'm not used to this whole billionaire courtship thing," she said, sipping her drink. "I'm not used to chasing someone who makes me nervous." "You're nervous?" she asked, surprised. "I haven't felt this off balance in years." She tilted her head. "Why me?" "Because you didn't care who I was. You just cared that I was late. You didn't flinch when I told you what I'm worth. Piper studied him. What are you worth? He leaned back in his chair, smile tugging at his lips. Last I checked, around 12 billion. She almost choked on her drink. You're joking. Nope. Why are you here drinking coffee with me then? Because I'd trade the best boardroom in the world just to hear you laugh again. She stared at him, jaw tight like she didn't want to smile. But she did. And that was the beginning. He walked her home that night, didn't try anything, just stood at her door and said, I want to see you again. I work weird hours. I own my schedule. She bit her lip. You're serious about this? I've never been more serious. He paused. Say yes. She didn't say anything. Just leaned in and kissed him slow, warm, and unexpected. When she pulled back, her voice was soft. Okay, let's see where this goes. Wesley took her hand. I already know where I want it to go. She raised a brow. Yeah? He grinned. I want to be late for every flight just to see you again. And this time she really laughed. Wesley tapped the side of his glass, watching the amber liquid swirl as the waiter disappeared into the background of the candlelit rooftop lounge. The city stretched behind Piper like a glittering promise, and she leaned into the view, her coat draped over her arm, her cheeks flushed from the wind. This is ridiculous, she said, her fingers brushing the hem of the silk blouse he'd insisted on buying her for tonight. We've only known each other for a week. I know, Wesley said, but I've never been good at waiting. Piper turned, her expression unreadable. You chartered the entire rooftop. I didn't want any distractions. She narrowed her eyes. You think a rooftop full of strangers would have distracted me more than this table covered in orchids and a bottle of red older than me? I had to make a decent impression. You made one when you showed up in the terminal again. Alone. No entourage. No assistant. I told you I don't bring people into things that matter. She sat across from him, unfolding her napkin with deliberate calm. And I told you I don't date men with private drivers and personal chefs. I didn't bring either tonight. You brought a helicopter. He tilted his head. It was faster. Piper laughed under her breath and reached for her menu. So, what do people eat on rooftops with billion-dollar views? Whatever they want. She lowered the menu. You still haven't told me why you're really here. Wesley leaned forward, his voice low. I'm here because I haven't been able to stop wondering what kind of person can freeze me with a single look. I'm here because when you said no to drinks the first time, it was the most honest answer I'd heard in years. And I'm here because when I'm around you, I don't feel like I'm performing. She went quiet for a moment. You don't strike me as the performing type. I've spent my life in rooms where everyone only tells me what I want to hear. And you think I'm different? I know you are. The food came, but neither of them noticed. Piper rested her elbows on the table, her tone shifting. I've dated men with money before, she said. They always wanted to fix me, upgrade me, turn me into something polished and presentable. I want to know who you already are. She studied him, the candlelight catching the gold flecks in her eyes. And what if I'm not someone you like? I don't think that's possible. You say that now, she said, but you've never seen my apartment. Or my paycheck. Or how I cry during reruns of hospital dramas. Wesley laughed quietly. I've never seen a woman wear confidence like armor and still be so completely herself. She glanced away at that just for a second. I didn't grow up with much. I learned early that people don't hand you anything unless they want something back. I don't want anything from you, he said. That's the part one don't get. I'm trying to offer something, not take. For how long, though, she asked. Until you get bored? Until some heiress with a better pedigree steps in? He reached into his coat and slid something across the table. She looked down. A plane ticket. To where? She asked, barely touching it. Rome. Her eyes met his. I can't just drop everything. You wouldn't have to. It's only 2 days. I'll have you back before Monday. Wesley, I'm not asking for anything permanent. Just a weekend. No expectations. Just you, me, and enough pasta to make us regret every decision. Piper leaned back in her chair. Do you always travel with women you've just met? No, then why me? He hesitated. Because I can't shake the feeling that the moment I walked through that gate, everything else in my life suddenly felt like background noise. She didn't speak for a long time. The wind picked up, brushing strands of her hair across her cheek. I've never left the country, she said finally. Then let this be your first time. I don't even have a passport. I can fix that. You said you didn't want to fix me. I don't, he said. But I can expedite paperwork. Piper shook her head slowly, a smile tugging at her lips despite her best efforts. This is insane. Maybe, he said. But so am I for thinking 2 cups of coffee and 1 dinner could make me want to rewrite my entire life. She looked down at the ticket again, running her thumb along the edge. Let's say I say yes. What happens when we land? I take you to the Pantheon. Then we get gelato. And if you're still not sure about me by sunset, I'll put you on the next flight home. Piper exhaled, her eyes never leaving his. You're really not going to make this easy, are you? I hope it's never easy, Wesley said. Easy is forgettable. She folded the ticket and slipped it into her purse. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. As they stood and made their way toward the elevator, Wesley slid his jacket off and placed it over her shoulders. She didn't flinch or protest this time. She just pulled it tighter and looked up at him as the doors closed. I'm not a fairy tale kind of girl, she said softly. Then I guess I'll just have to rewrite the ending, he replied. And for the first time that night, she didn't argue. The plane touched down on Roman soil just after sunrise. Piper's fingers gripped the armrest, her knuckles pale. You didn't say the descent was going to feel like a roller coaster. I thought it would be more fun if you found out in the moment, Wesley said, glancing over. You okay? Do I look okay? You look like you just survived your first international flight without throwing anything at me. That's progress. She let out a shaky breath. I swear, if the rest of this trip is anything like that landing, it won't be. He cut in, already unbuckling. There's a cappuccino with your name on it waiting outside customs. Bribing me with caffeine? I'm not above it. The moment they stepped out of the terminal, the air hit her warmer than New York had been, tinged with stone and citrus. A sleek black car waited by the curb, the driver already holding the door open. Piper paused. This is yours. No, Wesley said. It's for you. I don't need a driver. He opened the door anyway. Let me spoil you for 48 hours. Then you can go back to subway delays and overpriced taxis. She slid in, the leather seats cool beneath her as the city blurred past. Rome woke slowly, bathed in golden light. She watched it unfold through the window like a painting in motion, domes, shuttered balconies, fountains that seemed to rise out of nowhere. You've been here before? She asked. A few times. Never with someone. Not even once? He shook his head. Business doesn't leave much room for company. She didn't respond, but he noticed the way her eyes lingered on the streets, the way her fingers traced the edge of the window like she was trying to memorize it all. The car stopped near a narrow alley, and they stepped into a quiet courtyard, where a table for 2 was already set beneath a canopy of climbing vines. A waiter appeared with espresso before they even sat down. Piper raised an eyebrow. You planned a private breakfast? I wanted to make sure your first time in Rome didn't involve plastic cutlery and a buffet line. She sipped her coffee, then stared at him. You don't do anything halfway. I don't know how. The food came, but her appetite barely matched her curiosity. She leaned forward, her tone shifting. What were you like before all this? Wesley hesitated. You won't find any tragic origin story. No rags to riches. I was born into money. So you've always had everything? Materially? Yes. But not everything else. Like what? He looked down at his plate, then back at her. Trust. Loyalty. Real connection. No one's ever been honest with you? Not without a contract involved. She studied him, her fork untouched. And now you're here with someone you met at an airport? I'm here because I wanted to see who you were when you weren't behind a desk. And what have you seen so far? You notice everything. You think before you speak. And you're still trying to decide whether I'm for real or just really good at pretending. Piper leaned back, expression unreadable. I don't trust people who move this fast. I don't blame you, but I haven't walked away either. He nodded. That's not lost on me. After breakfast, they wandered. Not the tourist route Wesley led her through the quiet parts of the city, down cobbled lanes lined with open shutters, past bakeries that smelled like honey and flour, away from cameras and crowds. He stopped only once, outside a nondescript door tucked between two ivy-covered buildings. Come on, he said, unlocking it with a key she hadn't seen before. What is this? You'll see. Inside, the space opened into a sunlit studio. Canvases leaned against the walls, some finished, some half-started. The scent of turpentine and old wood filled the air. You paint? She asked, stunned. Not anymore. But this is yours? I bought it 5 years ago. I used to come here when I needed to get out of my own head. Her eyes softened. That's not something most people would guess about you. That's why I never bring people here. She turned, taking in a canvas near the window. It was unfinished, broad, sweeping strokes of color that hinted at a cityscape, abstract and bold. You stopped. I didn't see the point anymore. Why? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed to the far wall and pulled a dust-covered cloth from a smaller painting. It was a portrait subtle, intimate, and heartbreakingly detailed. A woman in a hospital bed, her smile faint but her eyes alive. Piper stepped closer. She was sick. My mother, he said quietly. Cancer. She passed before I finished it. I'm sorry. She's the only person who ever told me when I was being an idiot. I haven't picked up a brush since. Piper didn't say anything. She just reached out and took his hand. I didn't show you this for sympathy, he said. Then why? Because I wanted you to see who I was before the boardrooms and the jets. Before the numbers and the headlines. And who is that? He looked at her, steady. Someone who's tired of pretending he has everything when the only thing he really wants is something real. She held his gaze, her voice soft. You think this is real? I think it could be. Even if we're from different worlds? Especially because we are. She stepped closer, inches from him now. I don't know what this is yet, but I don't feel like I have to pretend with you either. Wesley exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. Then come back with me tonight. I want to show you something else. You're not finished showing me Rome? He smiled, the first true one since they landed. Rome's just the beginning. As they left the studio, fingers still intertwined, neither of them looked back. And for the first time in years, Wesley didn't feel like he was running from anything. He just felt like he was finally arriving. Wesley stood in the center of the rooftop terrace of his Tribeca penthouse, his mind sharp despite the hour. A string quartet played quietly in the background, the final notes of a Vivaldi piece vanishing into the night wind. Dozens of candles flickered along the balustrade, casting golden light across the marble floor. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and looked out at the skyline. The city pulsed beneath him, grounded and unrelenting, but tonight, it felt like it had paused, like it was holding its breath. Piper would be arriving any minute. He hadn't seen her since they returned from Rome 4 days ago. She'd needed space. He understood that. After everything they'd shared, the silence between them hadn't felt like distance, it had felt like anticipation. The elevator doors opened behind him. She stepped out in a slate blue coat, her hair loose, her expression unreadable. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. You didn't tell me there'd be music, she said, walking toward him. I didn't want to scare you off. I almost didn't come. I would have waited anyway. She stopped a few feet from him. Why here? Because this place has never meant anything to me until now, he said. It's always been just another asset. But when I imagined this moment, the only place I saw was here with you. You imagined this moment? Every detail. She looked around, her eyes passing over the candles, the musicians, the table set for two. You're not afraid of doing too much, are you? I'm afraid of doing too little when it matters. Piper's gaze lingered on him. I've been thinking. So have I. She crossed her arms. You're used to getting what you want. But I'm not something you can just acquire. I know that. So why me? I've had partners who made sense on paper. But you're the only person who's ever made me feel like I could breathe. Like I don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. She looked down briefly, then back at him. That's a lot to put on one person. I don't want to put anything on you. I want to share it with you. Piper's voice was quiet. I'm still figuring out who I am. I like my life, my job, my apartment. I don't want to be swallowed by yours. Then don't be. It's not that simple. It is, he interrupted gently. Because I don't want you to become part of my world. I want to build something new with you. Something that belongs to both of us. She stepped closer, her brow furrowed. You're serious. I've never said anything more serious in my life. The quartet stopped playing. Silence hovered. Wesley reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened. Wesley, I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring, not flashy, not oversized. A simple solitaire set in a thin platinum band. I had this made in Rome, he said. Not because I wanted to rush you, but because I knew that one day I'd ask you properly. What are you asking now? I'm asking if you'll let me love you. Fully. Without conditions. Without expectations. Just love. She didn't move, her throat working as she stared at the ring. I know you're afraid, he said. So am I. But I'd rather be terrified with you than fearless without you. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away. I don't need that ring yet. I know. But I want to hold on to it. He placed it gently into her palm. Then it's yours. She closed her fingers around it, then looked at him. I told myself I'd never get involved with someone who could change my world overnight. I don't want to change your world, he said. I want to fit into it. Piper stepped into him, resting her forehead lightly against his chest. You already have. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he'd never let go. The city kept moving beneath them, but up here, it was just the two of them. She pulled back slightly, her voice steadier now. You're sure you're ready for someone who cries during documentaries and leaves dishes in the sink? As long as it's your sink. You know I'm not going to quit my job and follow you around on private jets. Good. I need someone who'll keep my feet on the ground. She laughed softly, then looked up at him. I'm not perfect. I don't want perfect. He leaned down, brushing his lips against hers, slow, reverent, without urgency. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. You still owe me pasta, she said. I'll fly in a chef from Naples tomorrow. Wrong answer. He blinked. What's the right one? You'll take me to that hole-in-the-wall place you keep pretending you don't know about in Brooklyn. The one with the cracked windows and the 20-minute wait. Deal. She nodded, her hands still wrapped around the ring box. And we go back to normal tomorrow. As normal as we can manage. No more candlelit rooftops and orchestras unless it's a birthday or a serious apology. I can do that. She looked around, then at him. But tonight's an exception. She walked to the table, pulling out a chair and sitting down. Then start explaining this wine list, Mr. Kane. He joined her, the candlelight catching in his eyes. Only if you promise to let me walk you home after. You're already home, she said simply. And for the first time in his life, Wesley Kane believed her. Because he'd spent years building empires, chasing deals, commanding boardrooms, and none of it had ever felt like this. None of it had ever felt like love. But she did. And that changed everything. A soft cascade of petals drifted down from the canopy above the garden courtyard, scattering pale pink against the white stone floor. The spring air carried the scent of jasmine and orange blossom, and a string trio played somewhere behind the rows of seated guests. Piper adjusted the folds of her pale ivory dress with trembling fingers, her breath catching in her throat as she stood at the edge of the archway. Her heels sank slightly into the grass, but she didn't move, not yet. You okay? Came the low voice beside her. She turned to see her sister, Lila, adjusting the tiny bouquet in Piper's hands. "I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be this calm." Lila grinned. "You're not. Which means he's probably waiting out there wondering if you changed your mind." "I didn't." "Then go remind him." Piper stepped into the courtyard. The guests, all close friends, no press, no board members, no strangers, rose. Wesley stood beneath the arch of climbing wisteria, his dark suit immaculate, his expression unreadable except for the way his hands flexed once at his sides when he saw her. He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment since the first time he'd seen her behind that airport counter. When she reached him, he took her hand without hesitation. "I didn't think you could look more beautiful than you did in Rome," he murmured. "I've had a bit more sleep since then," she said. "You ready?" She nodded. "Let's do this." The officiant, a retired judge and longtime friend of Wesley's mother, began the ceremony. Neither of them heard much of it. Piper's pulse thrummed so loudly in her ears she could barely focus. Wesley didn't take his eyes off her once. When it came time for their vows, Piper didn't read from the card tucked in her palm. She let it fall to the ground and took a breath. "I never imagined myself standing here," she said quietly. "I never thought I'd meet someone who saw me exactly as I am and didn't flinch. But from the moment you stopped in front of my gate, even though you were late and out of breath and probably incredibly annoying, you saw me. Not what I do, not what I don't have, just me. You make me feel like I'm not a bystander in someone else's life. You make me feel like I'm home." Wesley swallowed hard, his voice low when he answered. "I spent years chasing everything I thought made me powerful. But I didn't know I was empty until you filled every space I didn't know was hollow. You didn't ask for anything. You never tried to change me. You just stood there, steady. And now I can't imagine a day without you by my side. You're not just my one, you're my only." They exchanged rings, simple, elegant, hers nestled with the one he'd given her on the rooftop, now resized to fit perfectly. When the officiant pronounced them married, Wesley didn't wait for the cue. He kissed her like there was no one else in the world. The guests erupted into applause, but Piper barely heard it. Her hands were in his, her lips still tingling, her heart full. Later, at the reception held in the garden of a historic brownstone Wesley had bought for the occasion and gifted to Piper as their new home, the two of them slipped away from the dance floor and into the house. Piper wandered into the library, trailing her fingers along the shelves. "You did all this in a month?" she asked, glancing around the renovated space that now felt nothing like the sterile properties he used to buy. "I had help." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "But I knew what I wanted." She turned to him. "When did you know that I wanted to marry you?" He stepped forward. "The second night in Rome. You fell asleep on the rooftop of the studio. I watched you breathe for 15 minutes. And I realized I never wanted to go to sleep without you in the same room again." She rolled her eyes, but the corners of her mouth curved. "That's dramatic." "I'm dramatic," he said easily. "But you ground me." They sat together on the old velvet couch, her head resting against his shoulder. "I was scared," she admitted after a while, "that I'd lose myself in your world." "You didn't." "No. Because you made space for me in it. Real space." He kissed the top of her head. "It's your world now, too. I don't care about the money, the properties, the jets. I know. But I like that you never made me feel like I had to earn my place. You earned it the moment you told me I was 3 minutes late." She laughed and he pulled her closer. "I want us to have a quiet life," she said. "Not boring, just real. I want a kitchen where we argue about who left the cabinet open. I want Sunday mornings with coffee on the floor. I want to fight and make up and grow old and still find each other interesting. I want all of that and more. I don't need more. But you deserve it." She looked up at him. "Then let's build it slowly. Together. No rush." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Not anymore." They returned to the party eventually, where Lila gave a toast that made everyone cry and Wesley's business partner gave a surprisingly heartfelt speech about how love was the best kind of investment. As the night wore on, Piper changed out of her gown and into a silk jumpsuit, and Wesley shed his jacket and tie. They danced barefoot on the grass, the moon high above them, the music soft now, as if the evening was winding down gently. When the last guest left and the candles flickered low, Wesley carried her upstairs to the room he'd filled with fresh peonies and books she loved, and they fell asleep tangled together, the city humming quietly beyond their window. Months passed. Piper didn't quit her job, she didn't want to, but she took weekends off now. They traveled sometimes, but not extravagantly. Just small escapes. A cabin in Vermont, a vineyard in Oregon. She kept her apartment for a while, then let it go on her own terms. Wesley started painting again. Not often. Not for anyone but her. He never showed anyone else the canvases he tucked away in the studio he'd rebuilt in the brownstones attic. They fought sometimes about dishes, about time, about their stubbornness, but it never lasted. They always came back to the couch, to each other, to the quiet promise that had begun the night he asked her to let him love her without conditions. And one day, as spring returned and the wisteria bloomed again in the garden, Piper stood barefoot on the terrace, watching Wesley in the kitchen below, humming to himself as he made breakfast. She pressed a hand to her heart. She hadn't lost herself. She'd found something bigger. Love that asked for nothing but gave everything in return. And she had said yes. Not to the ring. Not to the rooftop. Not even to the man who'd once missed his flight because of her. She had said yes to a life she never expected. And she'd never been more certain of anything in her life.